Now, with those shuffled answers being displayed here, it's time to make sure that once we select an answer, we move on to the next answer in line. And to do that, we must make sure that this question index here changes over time. Because this question index here determines which question is our current question, which then determines which question text and which question answers are shown on the screen. So how can we change this index? Well, by managing it as state again. And that's why I created questions screen as a stateful widget, so that we can manage and change state in there. We should now add a new variable here in this questions screen state class. And that could be the current question index. The name is up to you, but of course it should describe which kind of value will be stored inside of it. Now initially, this should probably be set to 0, so that we start with the first question in our list of questions. But it should then change whenever we click one of these answer buttons. Therefore, we also must add a method to this questions screen state class here. And that method could be called answer question, because that is what we're in the end doing when we click one of these answer buttons. We answer the question. And as a result of doing that, we want to move on to the next question. But of course, later, we also want to make sure that we store the answer that was picked. So therefore, here we have the answer question function, which doesn't return anything. And in there, I want to increase current question index by 1. Now, this can be done by setting current question index equal to current question index plus 1. This might look strange at first, but you can access the variable, which you then set on the left side of the equal sign, also on the right side of that equal sign, to derive the new value to which it should be set. Because that right side will actually be executed first. So here, when this line of code executes, Dart will first take a look at current question index, here on the right side of the equal sign, and take the value that's currently stored in there. Initially, that will be 0. It will then add 1 to it, so that overall, for the first time this function is executed, we would have a value of 1 here. And then this new value is stored back into this variable. So that is how we can increment this variable. And since this is something you will find yourself doing quite often in code, Dart actually also gives you a shortcut for this. Instead of writing it like this, which you can do, but which is a bit long, you can also set current question index plus equal 1. This code is equal to this code. By using this plus equal operator, you're telling Dart that you want to set this variable equal to its current value plus 1. So this is simply a shortcut for this. And if you want to increment the value by 1, there's an even shorter syntax, because you can then also just set current question index plus plus. This increments the value by 1, and only by 1. So if you want to add 2 to that value, this syntax could not be used. This syntax could be used though. But if it's 1 that you want to add, you can use this syntax, this code, for doing that. And a similar syntax would also exist for deducting 1 by using minus minus, or here in this case, minus equals. And that's not just the case in Dart. Instead, you find these syntaxes in most programming languages. So this will add 1 to the current question index. And now we can use the current question index here, instead of hard coding 0 inside of the build method, to access the question with that index here. Now, of course, at the moment, the build method would never execute again though, because as you learned before, you must call setState, the setState function provided by Flutter, in order to tell Flutter that the build method should be executed again. So that's the correct way of updating current question index. And with that, the next step is to make sure that this answer question method here is actually executed when our button here is clicked. Now, to achieve this, we just have to replace this empty anonymous function, which I used as a dummy value for my onTap argument here, which wants a function with a pointer at this brand new answer question function, which we just added. As you learned, without parentheses, because we want to point at that function and pass the function as a value to OnTap. And with this, if we now save this all, we should be able to click this and move between those answers. So that's working as it should. Of course, at some point we'll reach an error here, because at some point we try to move on to a question that doesn't exist, because we never stop incrementing this current question index. But we will of course take care of that soon as well.